my God, look at her! You ruined that dress, Andrea.
Maybe you should clean it up with your tears.
3 wealthy women poured red wine over my head while the entire restaurant watched and laughed. My hands were shaking, my uniform was ruined, and I couldn't fight back because I was hiding the biggest secret of my life. I'm a billionaire's daughter pretending to be poor, and the man I loved was about to discover everything. What you're about to hear is the most intense 6 months of my life. There's betrayal, cruelty, romance, and a twist that even I didn't see coming. If you love stories about justice, revenge, and real love, don't skip a second. Hit like right now because this gets wild. Let's go. My name is Andrea Sullivan, and I'm 25 years old. My father, Gregory Sullivan, is a tech billionaire worth $8 billion. Yes, billion with a B. I grew up in penthouses with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I wore designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I drove cars that turned heads everywhere I went. From the outside, my life looked like a fairy tale. But inside, I was drowning in loneliness. You see, when you have that much money, you start to wonder, does anyone actually see you? Or do they just see dollar signs? My last boyfriend proposed to me on a yacht in the Mediterranean. The ring was massive, the sunset was perfect, everything looked like a movie. But then I overheard him on the phone with his friend that same night. He said, and I quote, "Once I marry her, we split the money. She's stupid and easy to control." My heart shattered into a million pieces right there. I called off the engagement the next morning, and it wasn't just him. My best friend Sophie, the girl I'd known since high school, stole my jewelry and sold stories about me to tabloids. People I thought cared about me were just waiting for their opportunity to cash in. I developed anxiety so bad I couldn't sleep at night. I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd ever experience real, genuine love. The kind of love where someone wants you for your laugh, your quirks, your soul, not your bank account. The breaking point came at a charity gala 6 months ago. I was wearing a red designer gown that cost $30,000. A man accidentally bumped into me and spilled champagne on my dress. But instead of apologizing, his first words were, "You're Gregory Sullivan's daughter, right?" I have a business proposal. That's when something inside me just snapped. I ran out of that ballroom in my expensive heels, stood on the balcony overlooking the city, and cried. I remember thinking, does anyone see me? Just me? That night, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was going to disappear, completely. I would become someone else, someone ordinary, someone with no money and no name. And I'd find out once and for all if anyone could love me for who I truly am. I spent the next 2 weeks planning my escape. I withdrew cash that I'd earned from freelance graphic design, my secret hobby that nobody knew about. I bought fake identification documents online from a sketchy website. I cut my long blonde hair to shoulder length and dyed it brown. I packed one small suitcase with clothes from thrift stores, jeans, plain t-shirts, sneakers with worn-out soles. Then I left a note for my father that simply said, "I need to find myself. I'm safe. Please don't look for me." I took a bus to a small town called Maplewood, 8 hours away from everything I'd ever known. No phone, no credit cards, no safety net. Just me and about $3,000 in cash. The reality of what I'd done hit me hard that first night. I rented a tiny studio apartment for $450 a month. It had cockroaches crawling across the bathroom floor, a broken heater that rattled all night, and mold growing on the ceiling. My neighbor played loud music until 3 in the morning. I remember sitting on a bare mattress with no pillow, eating plain bread for dinner because that's all I could afford, and thinking, what have I done? But I couldn't turn back now. I needed to see this through. Finding a job was harder than I expected. I applied to 5 different places and got rejected by all of them because I had no work experience. How could I explain that I'd never worked a day in my life because I'd never needed to? Finally, a small family restaurant called Rosie's Diner hired me. The owner, Patricia, was a kind woman in her 50s who said she'd give me a chance despite my complete lack of experience. My first day as a waitress was absolutely humiliating. I burned my hand on the coffee pot and had no health insurance to treat it. I dropped an entire tray of dishes, and the cost was deducted from my paycheck. A customer yelled at me for getting his order wrong. By the end of my 10-hour shift, my feet were bleeding inside my cheap shoes, and I'd made $43 in tips. I cried in the employee bathroom, wondering if I was crazy for doing this. But then, in my second week, something changed. A man walked into the diner who would turn my entire world upside down. His name was Blake Carter. He was a mechanic at the local auto shop, and he came in every morning for breakfast. The first time I saw him, he was covered in grease stains, his hands rough and calloused from years of hard work. He had kind eyes, though, the kind that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He always ordered the same thing: coffee, eggs, and toast. Our first real interaction was a disaster on my part. I was so nervous carrying his coffee that I tripped over absolutely nothing and spilled it all over his jacket. I stood there frozen, waiting for him to yell at me like other customers had, but instead he laughed. He actually laughed and said, "Needed washing anyway." Then he left a $10 tip on an $8 bill. I was so confused. Why would someone who clearly didn't have much money be so generous? Blake became a regular in my section. Every morning, same booth, same order, but slowly we started talking. Really talking. He told me about his dreams of opening his own garage someday, how he was saving every penny and working double shifts to make it happen. He told me about his mother who had raised him alone and died 2 years ago from cancer. He had no siblings, very few friends, just work and dreams. When he asked about my life, I lied. I told him my parents had died in a car accident and that I was completely alone in the world. The guilt ate at me, but I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. One day after a particularly rough shift, Blake waited for me outside the diner. My feet were killing me, and I must have looked exhausted because he offered to drive me home. His truck was old and beat up, but it felt like the most comfortable place in the world. We sat in my apartment parking lot talking for 3 hours about everything and nothing. And that's when he said something that made my heart skip a beat. He said, "You're different from people here." I can't explain it, but there's something about you that feels rare. I wanted to tell him everything right then, but I was too scared. What if he rejected me? What if he only liked me because he thought I was like him, struggling, ordinary, real? Over the next few months, Blake and I fell in love. He fixed the broken cabinet in my apartment. He brought me coffee before my shifts. We'd go to the lake and talk under the stars. Our first kiss happened unexpectedly while watching the sunset from my tiny apartment window. I had never felt safer with anyone in my entire life. This wasn't the performative romance of my old world with expensive restaurants and luxury vacations. This was real. This was holding hands in his beat-up truck and laughing until our stomachs hurt. But then they arrived, the 3 women who would turn my new life into a living nightmare. It was a Friday evening when Vanessa, Chelsea, and Brittany walked into Rosie's diner for the first time. They pulled up in an expensive car and strutted in wearing designer clothes and carrying purses that cost more than my monthly rent. Vanessa was clearly the leader, a woman in her 30s with cold eyes and a cruel smile. They had a weekend house in Maplewood and apparently liked to slum it at local establishments. They sat in my section, and I knew immediately this wasn't going to be easy. Vanessa snapped her fingers at me like I was a dog. "Girl, we need water. Now." I brought them water with ice, and Vanessa looked at it with disgust. "This has ice." I said, "No ice. Are you deaf?" I apologized and got new water. Brittany looked at my worn-out shoes and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Are those from a trash can?" All 3 of them erupted in laughter. I tried to stay professional. I smiled, I apologized, I did everything right, but nothing was good enough. They complained about everything. The steak was overcooked even though it was perfect. The wine was cheap even though it was the same bottle they'd ordered. They made me take food back to the kitchen 3 times. Chelsea accidentally knocked a glass of water onto the floor, and Vanessa said sweetly, "Clean it up. That's your job, isn't it?" I got down on my hands and knees and wiped up the water while they took photos and laughed. They left a $2 tip on a $150 bill. Patricia watched the whole thing but couldn't interfere. They were paying customers, and we needed the business. The next Friday, they came back, and the Friday after that, it became their sick routine. Every week, they'd come to the diner specifically to torture me, and every week, it got worse. The incident that changed everything happened on a busy Saturday evening. The diner was packed. Blake was sitting at the counter having dinner after his shift at the garage. Vanessa, Chelsea, and Brittany were at their usual table in my section, and they were in rare form that night. Vanessa started by claiming her fork had spots on it. I brought her a new fork. She said it wasn't clean either. I brought another. She rolled her eyes dramatically and said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Are you trying to poison me?" Chelsea chimed in, "You're always sorry. Maybe you're just incompetent." Brittany added with a laugh, "How much education do you have?" "Third grade?" I could feel my hands starting to shake. I was trying so hard not to cry. Patricia was watching from behind the counter, and I could see the anger in her face, but she stayed quiet. The other customers looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. Then Vanessa ordered an expensive bottle of red wine. I brought it to the table and poured it carefully into her glass. As I turned to walk away, Vanessa suddenly bumped my arm hard. I stumbled forward, trying to catch my balance, and then, in what felt like slow motion, Vanessa grabbed the wine bottle from my hand and poured it directly over my head. The cold liquid hit my scalp and ran down my face, my neck, soaking into my uniform. The entire restaurant went completely silent. Red wine dripped from my hair onto the floor. I stood there frozen, humiliated, unable to move or breathe. Vanessa gasped dramatically, her hand over her mouth in fake shock. "Oh my God, you spilled wine on yourself. How clumsy." Chelsea and Brittany were laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Vanessa looked at me with pure satisfaction in her eyes and said, "Look at her. She looks like trash now." Oh wait, she already was trash. That's when I heard it. A loud bang that made everyone jump. Blake had slammed his hand down on the counter and was already on his feet, marching toward our table. I'd never seen him angry before, and honestly, it was terrifying. "Enough!" His voice echoed through the entire diner. "What is wrong with you people?" Vanessa looked at him with an amused smirk. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "Someone with basic human decency," Blake shot back. "She's done nothing to you," Chelsea scoffed. "She's a waitress." "This is her job. Her job is to serve food, not to be your punching bag." Blake was shaking with anger. He looked at me standing there covered in wine, and his expression softened for just a moment before turning back to rage. Brittany waved her hand dismissively. "Mind your business, grease monkey." Blake turned to Patricia. "You're going to let them treat your employees like this?" Patricia finally stood up from where she'd been watching. "Ladies, I think it's time you leave." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, enjoying every second of this. "We're customers. We'll leave when we want." Blake started walking toward their table, and I genuinely thought he might flip it over. I grabbed his arm, my voice breaking. "Please, don't. I need this job." He looked at me, and I could see he was torn between protecting me and respecting my wishes. "Andrea, they just—" "I know," I whispered, tears mixing with wine on my face. "But I can't lose this job. Please." Vanessa was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Listen to the poor girl. She needs her $2 tips." Patricia's voice cut through the tension, sharp and final. "Get out, now. You're banned from my restaurant." Vanessa stood slowly, throwing cash on the table. "This dump isn't worth our time anyway." As she walked past me, she leaned in close and whispered so only I could hear, "Know your place, waitress." The moment they left, I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I tried to wash the wine out of my hair in the sink, but it was everywhere. In my hair, on my skin, soaked through my clothes. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. Mascara ran down my cheeks in black streaks. My uniform was ruined. I looked exactly how I felt. Broken. There was a soft knock on the door. "Andrea?" It was Blake. I opened the door, and without saying anything, he pulled me into a hug. I sobbed into his chest while he held me. "Why are people so cruel?" I asked. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but you didn't deserve that." Not even close. He drove me home in his truck, gave me his jacket because I was shivering, and walked me up to my apartment. At my door, he said something I'll never forget. "Those women, they're miserable inside. Happy people don't hurt others like that. They hate themselves, so they try to make everyone else feel small." Over the following weeks, Blake and I grew even closer. He started picking me up from work every day. He'd bring me coffee before my shifts. He fixed everything in my apartment that was broken, the cabinet, the leaking faucet, even the annoying door that wouldn't close properly. We'd go to the lake and talk for hours, and one night, under a sky full of stars, he kissed me. "I've never felt this safe with anyone," I told him. "You make me believe in good things again," he replied. 3 months after the wine incident, Blake planned something special. He asked Patricia if he could use the diner after closing hours. She agreed, and he decorated the entire place with candles and flowers. He must have spent everything he'd saved. When I arrived, confused about why the diner was still lit up, I walked in to find Blake standing there in his best shirt, nervous and smiling. "Andrea," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "before I met you, I was just existing. Going through the motions, working, sleeping, repeat. But you? You made me want to dream again. You saw me, really saw me, when most people just see a mechanic with grease under his nails. You're kind and strong and beautiful, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." He got down on one knee and pulled out a small box. The ring inside was modest. He'd probably saved for months to afford it. But it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen because it represented real love. "Will you marry me?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded through tears and choked out, "Yes! Yes, 1,000 times yes." Patricia came out from the kitchen where she'd been hiding, clapping and crying herself. Blake slipped the ring on my finger, and we kissed while Patricia cheered. But as happy as I was, guilt gnawed at me. I needed to tell him the truth. Soon. Maybe after we celebrated for a few days, I'd sit him down and explain everything. He'd understand, right? He loved me. The real me. I had no idea that my time was already up. The next day was a busy lunch rush. The diner was packed with the usual Saturday crowd. I was taking orders, refilling coffee, doing my job. And then the door opened, and my blood ran cold. Vanessa, Chelsea, and Brittany walked in. Apparently, Patricia's boss had overruled her ban. These women spent too much money for the owner to turn them away permanently. Vanessa was carrying a large envelope, and the smile on her face was predatory. They sat in my section. Of course they did. Vanessa looked at me with mock sweetness. "Hello, Andrea." Or should I say, Andrea Sullivan. Everything stopped. My heart, my breath, the entire world. She pulled out printed photographs from the envelope and spread them across the table. Photos of me at charity galas in designer gowns, photos of me on red carpets, magazine covers with my face and the headline, "Billionaire Iris Andrea Sullivan." Chelsea gasped dramatically. "Oh my God, you're her?" Before I could say anything, before I could run or hide or disappear, Vanessa stood up and addressed the entire restaurant. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" Her voice carried through the diner, and every single person stopped what they were doing to look. "This waitress, who's been serving you for months, is actually a billionaire's daughter." She held up the photos for everyone to see, walking around the diner like she was giving a presentation. "Andrea Sullivan! Her daddy is worth $8 billion. She pointed at me, her finger like a weapon. "She's been playing poor, playing dress-up, making fools of all of you." People were gasping, whispering, pulling out their phones. And then I heard the voice I'd been dreading. "What's going on?" Blake had just walked in. He was still in his work clothes, probably coming for lunch like he always did. His face showed confusion as he looked around at the chaos. Vanessa spotted him, and her eyes lit up with cruel delight. She marched over to him, photos in hand. "Oh, perfect timing." "Daniel, sorry, Blake. Your fiancé has been lying to you." She shoved the photos in his face. "She's a billionaire, has been this whole time. Look!" Blake stared at the photos. I watched his face change from confusion to recognition to disbelief to betrayal. It felt like watching someone's heart break in slow motion. He looked at me across the crowded diner. "Is it true?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, but—" "You lied to me." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, an accusation, a wound. "Not about loving you, that was real." I was crying now, not caring that everyone was watching. Blake pulled the engagement ring out of his pocket. He'd been carrying it around like a talisman since I said yes. He looked at it, then at me. "Was this real?" His voice cracked. "Or was I just your little experiment? Poor mechanic boy falls for rich girl pretending to be poor, is that what this was?" "No, Blake, please let me explain." "My mom died with nothing," he said, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. "She worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford her cancer treatment. I work 60 hours a week just to survive, just to save enough to maybe one day have my own shop. And you—" His voice was full of pain and anger. "You were playing pretend? This was like poverty tourism for you?" "It wasn't like that." I was sobbing. "I just wanted to know if someone could love me for me." "By lying about everything?" He threw the ring on the table between us. "We're done." He turned and walked out of the diner. I started to follow him, but my legs gave out. I fell to my knees on the floor of Rosie's diner, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Vanessa stood over me, savoring her victory. "Ah, poor little rich girl. Welcome to the real world, sweetheart." The story went viral within hours. "Rich heiress pretends to be poor waitress" was trending on every social media platform. The comments were vicious. People called me a fraud, a liar, someone who mocked poverty for fun. Some people defended me, saying I just wanted real love, but they were drowned out by the majority who thought I was a privileged brat playing games. I quit my job at the diner. I couldn't face Patricia or any of the staff. I stayed in my tiny apartment, too ashamed to leave. Blake's friends came to yell at me. "You broke his heart. He hasn't eaten in 3 days." Patricia visited once, her disappointment clear in her eyes. "I trusted you," she said quietly. My father's lawyers called to tell me the scandal had affected company stock. And finally, my father called. "Andrea, come home. This has gone too far." But I couldn't. Not yet. I had one more thing I needed to do. I went to the country club where I knew Vanessa spent her weekends. I found her having brunch on the terrace, surrounded by her friends. I walked up to her table and she looked at me with amusement. "Come to beg for forgiveness?" "No," I said calmly, "to ask you a question." "Why? Why were you so cruel to me?" Vanessa laughed. "Because people like you disgust me." "People like me?" I sat down uninvited. "We're both rich, Vanessa." "So why?" Her smile faltered. Something shifted in her expression, something dark and painful. "You have everything," she said quietly, her voice losing its sharp edge. "Money and people who care about you. That mechanic? He loved you. Even when he thought you were nothing, he loved you." Understanding dawned on me. "You wanted him." Vanessa's face hardened. "I met Blake 2 years ago. My car broke down on the edge of town. He fixed it. He was kind and funny and real, so different from the men in my world. I asked him out." She laughed bitterly. "He turned me down, said we were from different worlds, that it wouldn't work. I offered him money. $1,000 just to go on one date with me." I felt sick. "What did he say?" "He said, 'I'm not for sale.'" Vanessa's eyes were cold. "No one had ever rejected me before. And then you showed up, playing poor, and he fell for you instantly. The one man who turned me down loved you without hesitation." "So you destroyed us," I said. "You destroyed yourselves," Vanessa shot back. "You're a liar, Andrea. I just helped everyone see the truth. You don't deserve him either." I stood up. "You're right. I don't deserve him. But at least I loved him genuinely. You just wanted to own him. To prove you could have him. That's not love, Vanessa. That's ego. I walked away, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open. That night, I wrote Blake a letter. 10 pages, front and back, explaining everything. The fake relationships that broke my heart. The loneliness that consumed me. The desperate need to know if anyone could see the real me. How much I truly loved him. I ended the letter with this. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to take me back. I just need you to know that when I was with you, I was the most honest version of myself I'd ever been. The money was fake. The name was fake. But my love, that was the only real thing I had. I left the letter at his garage with the engagement ring and prepared to leave town. 3 weeks passed. I'd packed up my apartment, said goodbye to the life I'd built. I was leaving the next morning when someone knocked on my door. It was Blake. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much. We stood there staring at each other for a long moment before he spoke. I read your letter 20 times. Blake, I'm so sorry. Stop. Let me talk. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I was angry. So angry. I felt like an idiot, like everyone was laughing at me. But then I started thinking about everything. He looked at me with those kind eyes I'd fallen in love with. The girl who spilled coffee on me the first day, that was you. The girl who cried in my truck after those women humiliated you, that was you. The girl who played with my nephew, who laughed at my terrible jokes, who fell asleep on my shoulder during movies, that was you. My heart was pounding. Rich Andrea, poor Andrea, I don't care about that. I fell in love with your soul, with the way you bite your lip when you're nervous, with how you hum while you work, with your kindness and your strength and your terrible taste in music. I laughed through my tears. I'm not saying I'm not still hurt, he continued. I am. Trust is hard for me and you broke it, but I understand why you did what you did. The world made you afraid to be yourself, and I get that. How do we come back from this? I asked. Slowly, honestly. You tell me everything, no more secrets. And we rebuild trust one day at a time. No more secrets, I promised. I swear. Blake pulled out the engagement ring. Same ring, new promise. We start fresh, but we start honest. He slipped it back on my finger and I kissed him like I was breathing for the first time in weeks. By the way, he said with a slight smile, I talked to Vanessa. What? Told her she needs therapy. And that if she ever comes near you again, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person she really is. Turns out, exposing people goes both ways. I laughed and cried at the same time, holding on to him like he was the only real thing in the world. Because he was. That was 8 months ago. Blake and I are still engaged, working on rebuilding what we almost lost. It's not perfect. We're in couples therapy, learning how to communicate better, how to trust again. But we're making it work. I started a foundation for workers' rights and fair wages. Patricia is my business partner now, and we're opening 3 more diners that actually pay employees well. Vanessa? She's actually in therapy too. She sent me an apology letter last month. It was short, but it was genuine. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. As for me, I'm still Andrea. Both versions. The billionaire's daughter and the waitress. Because I learned something important through all of this. True love doesn't care about your bank account. It cares about your heart. It sees you when you're covered in wine and mascara, when you're at your lowest, and it chooses you anyway. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe because I share real stories like this every week. Comment below. Have you ever hidden who you really are to find out who truly cares? I read every single comment. Remember, you are worthy of love exactly as you are. No masks needed. See you next time.